Okay. I get it. I get it. I get it. Don't go 0-3 last night. I get it. See, this is what happens, right? I'm in jeopardy right now of losing my cubicle. You'll find me in the basement. I got to talk to the boss like 6 times over. Don't go 0-3. So, yeah, you're upset. You're pissed off. You hate the world, which is essentially me right now. Understand that it's a pain in my ass, too. And I'm not happy about it either. And I got kicked in the teeth just like you got kicked in the teeth. And look at this. I got to deal with the repercussions like you have to deal with them out there as far as losing tickets. So, with all of that said, we move on. We have no choice but to move on. Yes, please, as you are either new here or a veteran on the Odd Shopper channel, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're new, well, then come on over, subscribe, be part of what we're doing here. I'm going to give you 3 yes or no run first inning plays and tell you all about what you can do at DraftKings and BetMGM, including, of course, this amazing opportunity at DraftKings to turn $5 into $200 right away. All right, so let's look at this thing. And we're going to start here, at least for me, in Oakland. This is going to be a good opportunity here to take advantage of Jacob deGrom on the mound. We'll get to Ken Waldichuk coming up in a second. Under a half inning at -175. This is not immediate reactionary bounce back material from going 0-3 yesterday. This is a sound play in the fact that it's not just Jacob deGrom who's going to be doing the heavy lifting here. It's not just deGrom, the Mets, that are going to be shutting down and out in the case of the first inning, the Oakland A's. What you're getting here is deGrom. I don't care how long he's going to be out there as far as 5 innings, 6 innings. I don't care if they're going to get the bullpen some work, knowing that the Mets have clinched a playoff spot. Doesn't matter to me. He's going to be out there dealing like it's an important game for the first inning. He's not just going to come in there hanging out and then like, oh, well, let me just pick this thing up in the second. Oakland doesn't get to many people, and they sure as hell are not going to get to deGrom. The A's, on the other hand, are sending Ken Waldichuk out. Now, Waldichuk marginally better than what the Mets are when you look at their runs per first inning average. Not good on the road. And again, this is the target zone for us, which is 0.38 runs per first inning away from Citi Field. That's bad. They just have not been able to string together consistent stretches of road trips where they've scored early in games, and early is the first inning. I don't care about the second inning, the second time around the lineup, any of that shit. The only thing we care about here, the only thing is the first inning, and they're just not doing it on the road in the first inning. So this actually helps a guy like Ken Waldichuk out, as opposed to just, all right, we're relying fully on Jacob deGrom to carry the water of this bet, which, essentially we are to an extent, right? But it's really just not about all Mets in this case, because they have their own issues, their own demons on the road that I don't know if that's going to help or hurt them long-term in the postseason, but it's definitely something we can bet and something we can capitalize on today. All right, Boss is gone. We're back. Let me remind you, because Boss will be back if I don't, about, and by the way, that's not Alex, that's just the boss, right? Whoever that may be, like the figurative thing. I don't want you in the comments being like, yeah, you mean.
Spicy.
I will make sure not to cuss.
Smart.
I guess I'm playing this
Tank Bigsby.
You don't love it, but you have to.
Yeah. All right, here we go again. Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern. You know what that means? College football is on the horizon here at Stokastic. We've got you covered all things, everything. DFS, we'll sprinkle in a little betting here. 13 games on this beautiful slate. I am Ben Rasa. I am joined, as I always am, by Matt Gajewski. Sir, got a little everything. Some big spreads, some close spreads, some high totals, some low totals. Not a bad DFS slate overall.
No, it's a good DFS slate. We are blessed with this Kansas Duke game. I'm really excited for that. It's on the slate. It's the People's National Championship. That's the game I'm most excited for. What are you excited for today?
So I'm excited for Rutgers in Iowa. Unfortunately, it's not on the DraftKings slate, a little 33-point total. I'm excited for UMass Temple, also not on this for obvious reasons. And then for real games, I'm excited for Tennessee and Florida. We're going to get to that game and much, much more. We're going to talk about PrizePicks as well, but let's dive into it if you are ready. And we'll start in the SEC. Tigers versus Tigers. Mizzou, Auburn. Auburn's a pretty bad team. They're still a 7-point home favorite, 51.5-point total. Let's start with the road Tigers. Let's start with Missouri. We know they have got a stud freshman on the outside in Burden. They've beat up on some bad teams. They got crushed by Kansas State. Where does this team rank amongst all the teams today?
They're kind of in this category where their offense is attractive enough where maybe you want to occasionally pick a guy or use a run back, something like that. Their backfield is a timeshare, so that's one spot I think you can immediately just wash away. They do have a mobile quarterback in Brady Cook. I think he's an outside consideration if you're playing tournaments. It's not the best game environment overall, and it should be pretty low scoring, but he's pretty mobile, so I think you could maybe take a shot there. Their receivers are kind of in this mid-price range. Don't love where they are. They do use 4 wide a fair amount, but it's either Dominic Lovett or Luther Burden for me. Lovett has been way more efficient than Burden this year, but Burden continues to find the end zone in really creative ways. He's got a couple rush attempts, a rushing score, a kick return touchdown, but he hasn't actually been great as a true wide receiver, so I'm a little skeptical of him. There are other receivers, Toski Dove, he's just a wind sprinter. I think this is a pretty team to evaluate. Maybe you pick a guy if you want to use like a run back in tournaments.
Yeah, you mentioned, Toski Dove, who seemingly is brought up every time on this show, not doing much. And it is a team that they're not a huge favorite or underdog, I should say. But at the same time, a methodical total. I still respect Auburn's defense in some regards. On the other side, we saw Penn State go in there and just the better team. And it's mostly because Auburn's QB situation is now a complete mess, but it's maybe getting more clarity due to some injuries. What do we make of that? And then where does Tank Bigsby, who you were talking about before the show, before the camera was on, where does he fall today?
This team is undergoing a quarterback change. That's the first thing we need to highlight. And there's no real questions here. TJ Finley and Zach Calzada are both out. Calzada is going to redshirt this year. That leaves just Robbie Ashford. And this guy is a spark plug on the ground. I don't really know what he's offering as a passer yet. He's been really up and down, a lot of turnover-worthy plays, has a pair of interceptions, and he's only thrown 29 passes. So that's an issue. But they're favored here. They should be able to impose their will on the ground, and I think that is the approach they fully utilize. So Ashford being involved in that at his cheap price, he's going to immediately pop in projections. I think he's fine for cash and tournaments. Running backs, Tank Bigsby is not getting quite as much work as we'd like. The two best players on this team on offense are Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter. Unfortunately, they both aren't on the field at the same time. They do cannibalize each other, but you're still getting 17 touches per game with Bigsby. I think there's upside for more in positive game script. Hunter, at his price, is probably not usable. He's more or less just a headache for those of you trying to target Bigsby, but he is awesome from a real-life perspective. I'm probably not getting to the receivers now that we're moving quarterbacks to Ashford, who's basically a glorified running back.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, just to kind of put a bow on this game. If you go to Ashford, you're running him naked?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else from this game? It doesn't seem like a stackable one given the limitations in the passing game.
That's my thoughts as well.
Game you wanted to talk about. Here it is, right up next. Duke and Kansas, the battle, the unbeatens. Duke probably going to lose here, but they're only a 7-point dog, 63.5-point total. That is pretty nice. And let's start with the Blue Devils. Riley Leonard has been certainly better than I thought, and he's just been really solid. He's $6,000 today. Let's start at the quarterback position with him. Where does he rank, and how do you think Duke attacks today?
He's a pretty good value overall, price adjusted at $6K flat. He's mobile. He's been very good on the ground actually to start the year. And as a passer, it's been a pretty low volume offense, but he's been efficient. Now, level of competition is something I think we should bring up here. Duke has played nobody yet. Their toughest opponent was Northwestern, but they beat up on Temple, shut them out. North Carolina, A&T. Not really much to see here, but the total's really high in this game. So bookmakers seem to think that Duke is going to continue scoring. If you're playing him, it's probably naked. Jalen Calhoun's their number one receiver, but again, just 6 targets per game for him. You're going to find better volume at that price. They incorrectly listed Jordan Moore as a quarterback on DraftKings. He plays wide receiver, but you're not going to take on the opportunity cost of flexing him in your super flex. Just doesn't make any sense. And then they rotate wide receiver 3s. Eli Pancol is probably the one to look at if you're getting down there, but there's just better values. The backfield's a 3-way committee, and then Riley Leonard's involved as well. So really tough to play anyone on Duke despite the team total. I think you're running Riley Leonard naked or a contrarian Calhoun stack, or you're probably just passing.
On the other side, Kansas has played a little, certainly stiffer competition than Duke has, and Jalen Daniels has just been awesome. Dual threat ability, knows what he's doing. He's 7,900. FanDuel price as well, somewhat appealing. Where does he rank, and how did the Jayhawks attack as home favorites? Something I never thought I would say ever with Kansas.
Sold out stadium too.
Crazy.
They sold out a game this year before USC. Go Kansas. We won't diss the USC fans anymore, but Daniels, I want to talk about his rushing first. He has an incredible role on the ground. A lot of these dual threat quarterbacks, they're getting there with scrambles. Jalen Daniels, he has 30 carries this year. 25 of them are designed runs. He scrambled 5 times and he hasn't taken a sack. That just tells you how involved he actually is in the ground game. Like Riley Leonard, for example, he's rushed 24 times. He only has 13 design rushing attempts. Generally, a lot of these quarterbacks do scramble. And with Dan, you still have that out. It's just with the design rush attempts, it elevates his floor that much higher. Then he's giving you a little bonus through the air. He's averaging about 190 yards per game. Not great, but again, with his ability to get there on the ground, you're not quite as worried about that. So I think he's fine. He's another guy that you're probably running naked. If you're stacking, it's either Lawrence Arnold, Luke Grimm, or Quentin Skinner. They're all just a little expensive compared to some other guys with better volume in this range. I have no problem running either quarterback naked. The ground game is a 2-way committee at running back, but with Daniels involved, it's basically 3 guys. If you look at the attempts, it's 28 for Devin Neal, 26 for Highshaw, and then 25. These are just designed attempts. 25 for Daniels. So tough to play any of the backs.
I mean, we're only 2 games in, and of course we're going to have different type of options, but did you find on kind of a macro level that there were more quarterbacks that were highly playable with just lack of stacking options, or is that maybe just an outlier of the first couple teams?
I do think we have a lot of mobile quarterbacks. So that's what I think is really driving this. We've talked about 2 games so far. I think you could use all 4 of the quarterbacks naked in these situations. There are some that are stackable later. There's some really good game totals, and we'll talk about them, but it does create an interesting dynamic on this slate, especially when you're navigating this game. It has one of the higher totals on the board. So if you want pieces of it, the best way to get there is the quarterbacks.
No doubt about it. And that's going to be the intricacies of kind of constructing these lineups. Chief, our man, Chief X, love the show. Well, we appreciate you. And we appreciate our friends at PrizePicks. They make this show happen. You see it right on the screen. They are offering that first match deposit bonus up to $100. That promo code Awesemo over at prizepicks.com. If you haven't been over there, it's just another way to get exposure and to use the tools that we have here at Stokastic to make some money. And they've got different types of categories that you're going to be projecting, whether it's rushing yards, passing yards, fantasy score, TDs. And I'm looking at some of these guys. Will Shipley's rushing yard total, your boy Jalen Daniels has got a rushing total of 67.5. I mean, you kind of mix and match around. I saw you drop a bunch in Discord earlier about some of your props. Do you have a category that you kind of find yourself leaning towards a lot, or is it really just go where the value is?
I usually just try to go with the value. Right now, early in the season, I do think there's some value on some of these quarterbacks. I think you can find guys that are mobile that maybe have been in non-competitive spots to start the year, so teams haven't utilized their mobility, or they've just taken like an errant sack here or there, but they're players that we are confident in. So one of these players is JJ McCarthy. We've actually seen him in limited samples. He's come in previously, been a spark plug in the run game for Michigan. His over-under's at 20.5 yards. Michigan hasn't played anybody this year, and I think he'll be a part of the designed run game when they're in competitive spots. Now, 17-point spread, you and I can debate whether that's competitive enough for McCarthy to actually see a ceiling on the ground, but over 20.5 rushing yards, I think that does make some sense.
We also, I believe, and maybe I've missed it, but I think that Ben Bryant has the new record now. His rushing yards prop is at negative 10.5 today. That's pretty lofty in the wrong direction. We got Bijan on the slate. Ibrahim, 127.5, but he might have like 40 carries. There's a lot to like here over at PrizePicks. We'll definitely be touching on that. But again, prizepicks.com. Go and check that out. A lot of opportunities there within these very games. Now, the next game up, this is where it could get serious. 71.5 point total. TCU taking some money. 2.5 point favorites at SMU. We know the Sonny Dykes connection. Dugan is now in control of this team. There's got to be a lot to like on both sides, but let's start with TCU.
Yeah, a lot to like here. I think TCU might go underlooked or overlooked. They've played nobody this year, Colorado and Tarleton State. They were mixing and matching quarterbacks to start the year. Morris is injured. You'll see Sam Jackson here and there, but he's coming in for his mobility. He's not going to cannibalize Dugan in the pass game. So you can immediately look to Dugan. He's a veteran. I think you can make the argument he's the best signal caller in this room. He's at least the most experienced. He's mobile. We've seen him well into like 50-yard territory multiple times in his career. And he's operating an offense which hasn't really shown what it's capable of yet. They're really slow this year, 126th in seconds per play. This is a Dykes offense. Last year, Dykes with SMU was inside the top 20 in seconds per play. I fully believe this is TCU just playing lackluster opponents, not showing anything yet. And I think this offense does pick up the tempo significantly. And I think they're incredibly efficient with the playmakers they have. And that's reflected in the total. So all this to say, don't be scared of TCU. Don't be scared of Dugan. You can run him naked if you want because he is mobile, but he's easy to stack. They did condense their receiver rotation a little bit. We know Quentin Johnston's going to be out there. He's in your GPP category. You're going to pivot off maybe like a Rashee Rice or a Downs to get to him. The other two project better than Johnston, but the upside's there in this offense. And then they use Savion Williams on almost every single route in week 1. He was right out there with Johnston, got banged up, but he's practicing. He's expected to play. If you're looking for a pivot in the mid-range, it would be Savion. They did rotate the wide receiver 3. It's mostly Tay Barber, but you're going to see Darius Davis and a couple other names involved. I'm probably not playing those guys because they're so close in price to Savion. And then in the backfield, 3-way committee, this has kind of been the case with TCU for years now, even when they had Zach Evans. It makes it difficult to target at these prices. Like Kendry Miller, awesome player, averaging over 7 yards per carry in his career. But if he's going to get somewhere between like 12 and 15 touches, I would rather just play like Bijan at a similar price. It's going to be Kendry Miller, Amari DeMarcado, and Amani Bailey, the Louisiana Lafayette transfer, all mixing into this backfield, making it kind of hard to get to outside of just like big shots in tournaments.
No doubt about it. I will say, I want to point out over on FanDuel, Kendry Miller's 7,100, Quentin Johnston 8,100. Those are much more appealing tags, in my opinion. Little more price to the premium over on DraftKings. But if you go to stack Dugan, I mean, are you? Well, let me ask you this: are you looking to do that? Because again, it's a 71.5 point total, and they're slight favorites. Are you going to plan to run some TCU stacks?
Yes.
On the other side, then of this game, Tanner Mordecai, he's got to be in consideration either on the bring back or just stacking up SMU. They still have nearly a 35 point implied total themselves. You mentioned Rice. I assume he's a premier option on the outside in addition to everything else this team has to offer.
Yeah, Rice is probably, I won't say the first guy in your lineup, but he's up there. He's somebody you should certainly be playing in cash. He's averaging 15 targets and 163 yards per game. This is the toughest matchup he will face all year. Maybe not all year, but at least to date. TCU's got a great secondary. They have 2 elite corners. All that said, the volume here is just too good to ignore. 15 targets per game is ridiculous. Even if the efficiency is not quite there, he's probably the safest receiver on the board. If you want to make pivots, which I think you should consider, I think it's a great way to get leverage. I'm doing so. We had Jake Bailey return to the offense last week. He immediately stepped in, played almost every single route. 5 targets for him, finished with 41 yards. Not great. That's what he has in the year, 41 yards. But if you're just looking for a pivot off Rice, he's the most involved player in the offense outside of Rice, at least among receivers. And then Austin Upshaw, he was out there for a majority of the routes as well. Now he's been almost entirely an afterthought, but 3,500. If you're just stacking this game, I think he could be a pivot off off Ollie, who's really, really cheap and probably the value piece people are going to be targeting. Austin Upshaw on the field almost every single play, just largely a win sprinter to this point.
When you look at this game, I mean, do you anticipate having certainly Rice right now, just giving you a peek behind one of the many reasons you want to sign up here at Stokastic? Rashee Rice could be the highest owned player on this entire slate. Do you anticipate this game being over-owned, or do you say, you know what, the TCU stack isn't garnering that much ownership right now, nothing crazy, and you can really access that, and then you have Rice on the run back if you want to?
The only player I see coming in with a ton of ownership today is Rice.
Yeah.
I don't think Bailey or Upshaw are going to be significantly owned. There's a lot of good quarterbacks, so I honestly don't think Mordecai is going to be really owned either, and he's a guy we know can run. He's averaging over 300 yards per game. They run a similar offense to TCU. It's going to be up tempo. It's going to be pass heavy. So Mordecai benefits from that. And he can certainly backdoor his way to 300 yards and give you a floor on the ground. And even Trey Siggers is a good GPP play. It's a really tight spread here. So I don't think Siggers is going to come in with much ownership. He was injured in their second most recent game. I thought he would come back into a timeshare, but he did not. 19 carries for Siggers right away in a game they lost, 2 targets, 21 touches for Siggers coming off the injury. That's a lot of work, and he's 5,900. People are going to be playing other backs in this range. I like him for tournaments as well. Even with the high total, I think SMU is not owned enough today.
The next game is not what we just talked about. It's Baylor and Iowa State, 45.5 point total, back to reality. Competitive spread, and Iowa State, I mean, I think it speaks more to how bad Iowa is than anything else, but regardless, let's start with Baylor. We saw them a little bit, and we talked about them a little bit when they went to BYU. And Blake Shapen is a name that we've seen. The volume, though, doesn't seem to be there. I'm not sure what would have to happen for him to throw the ball 30-plus times in a game. When you look about this, is there a lot to target in a game with a pretty low total?
Not really on the Baylor side. They have a lot of uncertainty right now. Shapen is not – he's not been what the coaching staff thought he was, at least to start. And not all his fault. They have terrible pass catchers on this team. They are getting back Monterey Baldwin and their tight end Ben Sims today. I'm not sure they're real difference makers anyway. So Shapen, he's somewhat mobile, not great there. Low volume offense. He hasn't been efficient. They haven't moved the ball through the air. It's really tough to target him or any of these receivers. Not only is it an inefficient passing attack, but they rotate a bit. That's tough. And then the backfield. Tay McWilliams got injured. They tried to use Craig Williams and Quaylon Jones. They were both incredibly inefficient against BYU. And then Richard Reese, he's really only seen the ball against the bad teams they've played, but he's been electric when he's touched it. 19 carries for him last week. Again, weak opponent, but he's been so good on the ground. At some point, they're going to have to involve him out of necessity. He was clocked as the second fastest player in all of college football last week. He's an electric freshman. I'm worried this devolves into a 3-way committee, which is worst case scenario for a team with a really low total in a slow game environment on this slate.
Do you see any merit to saying this guy could possibly never be the Stone Min again, and I'm just going to try to do it right now and hope they give him the keys?
Yeah, he's going to pop in some projections. He's not going to be like a lock or anything, but if you ran like 150, you'd get some of this guy. He's just priced at an egregious point. If this is the role he plays, even in a 3-way committee, he would become a value. At that point, it just comes down to the opportunity cost. Would you rather use a roster spot on Richard Reese and maybe get up to like a Josh Downs or Rashee Rice, or would you rather play Bijan Robinson and like a Donovan Ollie? And those are the decisions you'll have to make, but he's in play.
On the other side, Hunter Deckers and co. He's got Hutchinson on the outside. He's going against a strong Baylor defense, but they've already played a very strong defense in Iowa. So we have some type of blueprint on what we might see here. You've got Brock in the backfield as well. Talk to me about the main targets for the Cyclones.
Xavier Hutchinson's a downright alpha. Even in this low volume offense, he's averaging 13.3 targets per game, 36% target share. He's over 100 yards. He's matchup proof at this point. And Deckers has distributed him the ball. Reasonable game against Iowa, really strong defense. So I think you can be confident in Hutchinson. He had 19 targets against Iowa, and he's been in double digits every single game. But that 19 target game just speaks to his role when they keep things competitive. Hunter Deckers has eyes for him and eyes for him only. The next most targeted player, Jalen Noel, 15%. Xavier Hutchinson's the guy you're playing in this offense if you're playing one. Deckers, I think he's uncertain. So he's kind of in this category right now where he played a really slow game against Iowa that I don't know if you can take much from. Most games aren't played to that pace and that total. And then he's played 2 cupcakes. So does Deckers have a ceiling we haven't quite seen yet? Maybe. The total in this game is really low, so I'm going to be betting against it today. But if he is actually awesome and we don't know, he's never going to be this price again. That's always the argument for these unknown quarterbacks. Last guy, Drill Brock, he saw 27 carries against Iowa and 6 targets. Now, the other games against Cupcakes, they involved other players, and they are getting back Cartevious Norton today. He could be involved. But we've at least seen glimpses of Brock handle a monstrous workload. Again, out of the 3 games, one of them was competitive, and he touched the ball 33 times. I'm playing a little bit of Brock in case this game stays close and they actually view him as the heir apparent to Breece Hall.
It does seem, I mean, even for a methodical offense, you mentioned the consolidation. When they pass the ball, Hutchinson. When they run the ball, Brock. It's keeping it pretty simple in some regards. Now, I do respect Baylor's defense, but again, they already played Iowa, and I think volume, kind of paired with this price can keep these guys relevant. I assume it's a game that's very far down the stackability, though.
Yeah.
Tough scene. Clemson, one of my key bets today. You can check out all the betting analysis on Odd Shopper, YouTube, me, Matt, and the whole gang, giving you all our picks for these games. Clemson is ticked to 7.5. They're going into Wake Forest, 55.5 point total. Clemson's getting some pieces back, but the pieces that we really know, we talked about him with PrizePicks, with his rushing yards prop sitting in the mid 80s with Will Shipley. Uagalele so far has held on to the job. We'll see about that, but Clemson, I think, should have ample opportunities to put up some points today.
I think so too. Wake Forest was grading out pretty well early in the year on defense, but they definitely got exposed last week to a team I'm not really fond of in Liberty. Clemson should be able to move the ball on them. I think preferably they would like to take the air out of the ball, use Will Shipley on the ground. They've actually given DJ Uagalele a fair amount of designed rush attempts. A lot was made this offseason about Uagalele losing 20 pounds. It is apparent in the run game. He's gotten 10, and then he won against a Cupcake, and then 8 design rush attempts. If you exclude the game that was just an FCS opponent against Furman, that's 18 rush attempts designed in 2 games. That's a big workload on the ground for Uagalele. Now, on a 13-game slate, he's still not projecting that well. The game environment is middling, 56 total, and I don't think he gives you a ton as a passer, so you're going to see some other cheaper guys like Ashford be a little bit higher in terms of price-adjusted projection. But Uagalele for tournaments is interesting because of the designed rushing, and they're the showdown slate. If you're playing showdown, I think Uagalele is a decent contrarian captain. A lot of people are probably going to flock to Shipley, not realizing how much Uagalele has been involved on the ground.
If you do go to him, though, are you looking to a Nada, a Collins on the outside, or are you just saying, you know what, I'm hoping he falls in the end zone on his own twice?
I would hope he rushes in, but the receiving room is a little tough to evaluate right now. They've played 3 blowouts, so even the Power 5 games against Georgia Tech and Louisiana Tech, 20-point victories or more. So Bo Collins and Joseph Nada have the highest route rates and target shares on the team, but neither of them's above 15.5% target share. Route rates haven't really climbed above 60%. So it's tough. I don't know that these guys are the locked-in wide receiver 1 and 2s. You also have EJ Williams rotating on the field, Brandon Spector, and Antonio Williams. He's a top 70 recruit, 4-star receiver, and top 70. That's like borderline 5-star. He's been awesome when he's on the field. He's their second leading receiver, despite only having 10 targets. At this point, we've seen Bo Collins, Nada, Williams, Spector. These guys have played for Clemson for multiple years. I don't want to say we can confidently say that these guys are just dudes out there, but they kind of are at this point. If they haven't shown an elite ceiling yet at this point in their careers, I'm not really confident that they do. Williams, as the near 5-star freshman, he could have a talent ceiling that's on par with like a Justin Ross or a T. Higgins that we haven't seen in years. We just don't know. So in Showdown especially, I'm going to be taking shots on Antonio Williams, just the unknown talent that has the recruiting profile. And then we kind of glossed over Shipley. He's a pretty good play. They're going to use multiple backs. You're going to see Pace and Maffa involved in this game. So he's not going to project as well as some other guys price adjusted, but the ceiling's there. They have shown the ability to ride him when games are close.
Yeah, this Williams guy, I saw them play a couple times. He's got some like Amari Rogers. He looks like he's going to be good. No doubt about it for them. I still think in this game, Clemson. I mean, this is a good test for them, but I would hope that they could answer it. I don't think Wake Forest is that good. And before we talk about Wake Forest, good question from chat, Cameron. With all the timeshares and lack of true bell cow backs, do you see yourself maybe going to more wide receivers in the flex today? Or do you still think maybe you're going to try to get a third running back in there?
I built 30 lineups today. I'm about 50-50, a little skewed towards receiver and flex.
Yeah, I do think that sometimes that's one of the most important things we talk about here at Stokastic is being flexible. Each slate is different. Sometimes your lineup constructions, you're always going to want two quarterbacks, but other than that, sometimes the pricing dictates you to do some things that maybe are a little atypical. On the other side of this game, Sam Hartman, of course, has returned. They're throwing the ball all over the place. They can't really run the ball. They're just going to have to simply, throw it to win this game. There's no doubt about it. Perry and Green and these guys are going to have to be busy. The front of Clemson is serious business. What does that do to Hartman? He's not going to be running upside, I assume is non-existent here. How do you see this game going for Wake's offense?
He's generally mobile, but to your point, I wouldn't expect a ceiling on the ground from Hartman. And last year, this game went way over the total. It played into the 70s. Hartman backdoored his way to 300 yards. If this plays to the total, which is the most likely outcome, books are sharp, I would expect Hartman to be a little below his season average in passing. He's over 300 yards per game on the year. This is probably the toughest defense he'll see all season. So credit to him that he went over 300 last year, but that is not the most likely outcome. And then for stacking Wake, this has gotten a little more tricky. They're rotating receivers more than they did last year. A.T. Perry and Donovan Green still have route rates in the 70s. That's fine, but their target shares aren't great. Perry's at 25.7. That's fine, but at 7K, I'd rather play Downs. I'd rather try to get up to Rice. I'd rather play Hutchinson for just 300 cheaper. And Donovan Green's target share is at 17.8%. Not great. Last week, Donovan Green was out-targeted by Keyshawn Williams and Jamal Banks. Now, outside of Green and Perry, Taylor Morin's their third receiver. He's in a firm rotation with Keyshawn Williams, Jamal Banks. These guys are all going to see the field, and it kind of cannibalizes each and every one of them in terms of their ceiling. For Showdown, I like Banks at his price, but again, they played a really competitive game against Liberty last week. Banks had 7 targets. Williams had 8 targets. Taylor Morin had 6 targets. Green, 6 targets. A.T. Perry led the way with 11, but that's still not the role he played last year. So just a couple notes there. You're not playing the run game. It's terrible.
Yeah, the run game is bad. I'm not high on Wake. I'll get right to it. I think that the Clemson line is going to have serious push up front. I don't really think Clemson secondary is all that good, to be honest, but I'm not sure you get there with Hartman on the rushing upside. He's going to have to throw the ball a lot. It seems like maybe a one-off at best, but wide receivers pretty deep. And you mentioned the running backs are non-existent. Are you getting to a lot of Hartman stacks, or is that certainly not the priority for you?
No, again, it's just 30 lineups for me, so it's not like 150 or anything. If I was 150, I'd probably have a little Hartman, but in my 30, I don't have any.
Interesting game here. Michigan's biggest test, and they're still, 17-point favorites against Maryland, but Maryland at least can do some things that could maybe expose some of the weaknesses if Michigan has any, and that starts with Mr. Tagovailoa. They're going to throw the ball a lot here. Will they have success? Let's start with the Maryland passing games. We've seen them against SMU. We know they want to throw the ball. They've got alphas on the outside, and Demas and Jarrett, and guys that we know can play, but they're going up against maybe their toughest matchup of the season.
For sure. Maryland's tried to run the ball a little bit more this year. Their pass rate last year was around 60%. This year it's down at 52%. And that's been reflected in Tagovailoa's bottom line. Still averaging close to 300 yards per game, but he hasn't ticked above that mark like he did last year. He's semi-mobile, not really too much. He's kind of like his brother, where the mobility is there in scrambling situations, but he's far cry from Lamar Jackson. Receivers tough for them. Nobody above an 18% target share. Jarrett leads the way, just 5.3 targets per game. He's been really underwhelming in his career, coming in as a really high-profile recruit he was. He's essentially a possession receiver. It's tough to play him at his price. Hutchinson's cheaper, just way better volume there. And then Dante Demas, I don't think he's all the way back from the injury yet. He finally climbed to 75% of the routes last week, but he has just 11 targets on the year, 57 total yards. he just doesn't look like the same explosive player. There's always the hope that he returns to that as he's further removed from the injury, but really tough to get to Demas at his price. And then rotation behind him. Jay Sean Jones will rotate with Jacob Copeland. Tight ends are rotation. After what we've seen from Maryland through the first 3 games, I'm a little less interested in stacking this team.
Over on PrizePicks, I get it. I get why these are suppressed. You've got Jared at 61.5 receiving yards. You've got Demas at 35.5. I think I'd lean over on the Jared just volume alone, but at the same time, you illustrated that it's not a simple situation in that receiving core right now.
I would play Demas if I was playing anything there. His role is ascending. This will be a competitive game where they're throwing a lot. Jarrett's like maxed out in his role. He is what he is. There's no room for growth.
Do you think, just kind of on a gut feel, that they can put up some? Michigan has played legitimately nobody. Do you think that they can put up some points? Michigan's defense, I didn't think was going to be like world beaters. I think they could score a little bit here.
I do too. The problem with Maryland historically the last few years, and why I've lost so much money betting them.
Correct.
They move the ball and then they throw a pick six, or they have these just erratic negative plays. They take a long sack, get out of field goal range, something like that. And then suddenly they're down like 24 to nothing. It's like, how did Maryland get in this? They maybe are outgaining or on pace with the opposing team. Now that's kind of volatile, but Tagovailoa does have turnover worthy plays. He has been erratic at times. I think they move the ball a little bit. Maybe it comes in garbage time, but for DFS, we don't really care when it comes as long as it comes.
On the other side, really, there's only 2 outcomes here. Either JJ McCarthy is legitimately the best quarterback ever, or he's due for some regression when he plays real competition. Because right now, the guy is like legitimately perfect. It was a clear move to him, but how do you think he will fare in this spot? And with his mobility, does he put himself amongst the guys that are playable here?
He's certainly playable. The mobility is excellent. Going back 2 years now, we've seen him in the gadget roles. He should be fine as a scrambler. Would expect some designed rush attempts for him. They haven't shown that yet, but they haven't needed to. He has 6 design rush attempts on the year. That's pretty good considering the snaps he's played. But overall, stacking him, I think, is challenging. The receivers are a little bit expensive and they will rotate. So Ronnie Bell has actually come back from the injury. Props for Ronnie Bell. He looks like the wide receiver one that we saw in previous years. Leads the team easily in receiving yards, highest target share, 24%, but he's 7.3K. Are you going to play him over Xavier Hutchinson? Probably not outside of tournaments, especially for a team that likes to run. But he's been efficient if you want to use a contrarian stack. Cornelius Johnson's going to be the 2. This is a really good receiving room. They have a lot of talent, a lot of high-profile recruits. So the fact that they can rotate Roman Wilson, AJ Henning, Angelo Anthony, these are really good pass catchers. Like, selfishly, I wish one of them would like transfer to Notre Dame so we could have a competent offense there. But alas, it's a benefit for Michigan. These guys are awesome. In the run game, we don't have Donovan Edwards today. He's still injured. That means Blake Corum's going to lead what should still be a committee, but Corum's electric, super efficient on the ground, excellent pass catcher. We saw that last year. Last year, they basically used 2 backs and just Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum. I think the guy that comes in and plays the theoretical Hassan Haskins role is CJ Stokes. 3,900 for him. Michigan runs so many raw run plays that you should be taking a look at Stokes as just a cheap, affordable option that you use in tournaments specifically. And maybe you see some other backs like Isaiah Gash get involved, but I think it's primarily Corum and Stokes.
Yeah, you mentioned certainly they're going to want to run the ball, and they're going to have to do a little. JJ McCarthy, he's got 4 incompletions on the season so far. That seems unsustainable, but Michigan's got talent up and down here. It's just a matter of will any consolidate. Still healthy favorites at home. Any of these guys cash viable or just firmly in the tournament consideration?
Tournaments.
Chandler Morris warming up. Dykes said he would not play. I'm going to take the coach at his word, but I'm surprised that he's even dressed.
Yeah, I saw that tweet. I don't know what to make of it.
They should just go with Dugan. Whatever. That's a different show for a different
time. Their offense
time.
was legit bad when he played against Colorado.
It was not good.
Get upset.
Yeah, I was really concerned because I had quite some money. Rice and Brock, oh, man, Rice and Brock or Hutchinson and Singleton. That's a straight coin flip. All four of those guys are really good plays.
What was it?
Rice
I
and,
see it in the chat.
Yeah.
Rice and Brock, Hutchinson, Singleton. I would go Rice and Brock. But
yeah,
that's a tough 2v2.
That's a tough 2v2, no doubt. All right, let's keep it moving. Central Michigan and Penn State. This is the one gigantic spread here. But we have seen Central Michigan play Oklahoma State. They put up some points. They're going to get destroyed, but they might help for the environment. 62-point total. Let's talk about the old Chippewas. Are they playable despite being nearly a 4-touchdown underdog?
I think so. More or less in that, okay, maybe I want to run back to a Penn State kind of realm. I don't think you want to stack this team because of the low total, but they're very fast. They're very pass heavy, 60% pass rate, hyper speed in seconds per play. Daniel Richardson's competent delivering the ball. He's actually averaging 296 yards through the air. That's going to be awesome when we get into MAC play, but against the best secondary he'll face all year, I'm not too interested. He's not mobile. Lou Nichols, he's also the victim of playing tougher opponents in non-con. Just 92.3 rushing yards per game, despite averaging 28 touches. I'm kind of scared to fade Lou Nichols at this price and this workload, but the efficiency is just not going to be there for him. Another guy where I'm going to be slamming him at a reduced price when MAC play starts, but GPP only for Lou. In the receiving game, I think you can use these guys as one-offs or run backs if you're using anyone on Penn State. Joel Wilson leads the team in targets. He's their tight end. I wouldn't expect that to continue. He's their second leading receiver. Jalen McGahee is their first leading receiver right now, 200 yards for him. But Carlos Carrier missed their last game. He had his wisdom teeth removed, so no real risk of missing this game. But he previously averaged 9 targets per game, averaged 79.5 yards per game. When you look at everything on a per game basis, Carrier looks like the wide receiver 1.
On the other side, massive team total for Penn State. We know we've got Clifford probably in the conversation just because of the pure amount of touchdowns they should put up. But I think Singleton is the guy everyone wants to talk about. If Lee sits or even if Lee plays, where does Singleton rank amongst the backs today?
I don't think it really matters if Lee plays. He's been terrible. And if Lee plays at all, I think it's just in garbage time at this point. To me, Singleton's been so good where once Penn State starts playing competitive games, they need to feed him 20 touches, and I think they will. He's averaging over 10 yards per carry, back-to-back 100-yard games. No one's done that at Penn State in a few years now. So Singleton has multiple paths. One, he's just super efficient. He continues to average, I don't know, somewhere in the 7 to 10 yards per carry. I think that's live considering the opponent. And he still gets you there on efficiency. Or Central Michigan keeps this somewhat close and then he gets there on volume. There's multiple paths. So I think he's solid in tournaments, but ultimately he still doesn't have the same workload as like a Bijan. That's going to render him a little volatile and probably a better play for tournaments than anything else. But the dude's a stud. Central Michigan is a team that doesn't take their foot off the gas. Even when they're getting killed, they're always live to backdoor you. They're going to try to keep things close. So as far as opponents go, if you're playing a MAC team and you're looking for DFS appeal and stackability, Central Michigan's probably the team you want to play.
Does that mean on the flip side of that you could go to Clifford and say you throw in Tinsley and maybe one of the other two and go for that type of passing stack? Or do you think that's maybe a little too aggressive?
He's tough for me. The team clearly doesn't want to use him. When they're up in games like this, 28-point spreads, they're going to use LR just because they want to evaluate him at some point. So you're already looking at the potential for reduced snaps. In their previous game against Ohio, which was a big spread, their pass rate dropped, on the year, it's 51.5%. It dropped to 36% against Ohio. So they took the air out of the ball too, rode the run. That should be the blueprint for them here. So Clifford to me is very, very risky. That's going to trickle down to his pass catchers. If you want to take one based on talent alone, Mitchell Tinsley is a stud, but at 7.7K, I'm just trying to find the salary to get to Rice. Keandre Lambert-Smith, Parker Washington, they round out the trio here. They're all middling values, nothing really to write home about. The one thing that I'll say is Brenton Strange, highly involved as a tight end. He leads the team in receiving. I thought this would be a rotation with Theo Johnson. Johnson's been banged up, but he's back now. But Strange has played so well, I don't think they could take him off the field. So if you want to throw a dart, 4.3K is not terrible.
Florida and Tennessee, college game day is their old school rivalry in the east of the SEC. Florida can't really pass the ball. Anthony Richardson's a ridiculous athlete, but his passing so far has been atrocious. So is he just another? I mean, it really has. Come on now. Like, Is he in play along with all these other just straight on the ground, or is there more to it here?
He's really risky right now, not just from the throwing, but reports coming out of Florida suggest he's banged up. That looks to be the case in his designed run attempts. 9 design runs down to 1, sticking at 5. He needs double-digit rush attempts if he's going to pay this price tag off, and he just hasn't been getting them. Reportedly banged up, like he's just a strong fade for me until we can prove he's healthy and involved in the run game.
Does that make the entire team kind of a fade? Because, with him cannibalizing some of it, he really doesn't have a ton of passing upside. What do we do with Florida, or should we just discard them?
I'm Xing them out.
Good. Get out of here. I bet Tennessee, so I'm on board with that. Tennessee, play fast, Hendon Hooker, small. News already, it looks like pretty much officially that Cedric Tillman is going to sit. So what happens there? Is it Brew McCoy and Hyatt? Are there other guys now in play? Talk to me about the Vols offense.
You're going to see a drop off. He's a future NFL receiver, but they have capable playmakers behind him. Jalen Hyatt's averaging over 3 yards per route run. That's elite. The targets haven't actually been too different either. 28 targets for Tillman, some of that depressed because of the injury. 22 targets for Hyatt. Hyatt leads the team in receiving yards. He's been hyper efficient, and I think he's capable of stepping into a wide receiver 1 role. He's a good value, solid pivot off Hutchinson, and maybe if you're just paying down a little bit off Rice, he doesn't project quite as well. So leverage to be had there in an elite offense with an elite team total. Brew McCoy is going to be the wide receiver 2. He's basically just been a win sprinter to this point in his career. Huge bust in terms of paying off his 5-star recruiting label, but he's now going to be into a full complete route share at 5K, another decent pivot there. And I think Ramel Keaton's going to open as their wide receiver 3. In terms of like betting markets and how this affects the offense, Ramel Keaton's a former starter for this team. It's not like he's a freshman with no snaps to his name. This guy started games for Tennessee previously. Now, he's not very good, but I at least like that he's an experienced veteran at this point, a guy who can come out there and play snaps if you need to. He would be a dart throw at 4.2K if you want to get someone down there. I'm also interested in the run game. It's a timeshare, but it's one of these timeshares that I think people misconstrue. Tennessee runs at the speed of light. They're going to have 40 rush attempts in a backfield in certain weeks, and you just can't have one back out there playing 85 snaps, handling 40 rush attempts. So yes, they're going to involve 2 guys, but with that said, they both have upside to receive 15 to 20 touches on a weekly basis, and we've seen that in competitive games for Tennessee, not just this year, but last year as well. I will say Jalen Wright has run laps around Jabari Small this year. Jabari Small was the listed starter to begin the year. He got banged up last week. He will play today, but in his absence, Jalen Wright's been so efficient, I'm not sure they can take him off the field. I'm playing GPPs as if the backfield here has tilted 60-40 in favor of Wright over Small, but just know previously it's been Small. Small's more expensive. This is just an angle that I'm thinking about targeting.
One of the many quarterback situations in the unknowns is Texas now. Quinn Ewers healed much faster than anticipated. And right now, what is the status in terms of them as they take on Texas Tech? And then talk to me about just Bijan and the rest of the Longhorns.
I think Quinn Ewers is going to play. There's been optimism all week. We won't know till they actually start doing warmups. They're a late game, so have a contingency plan available. Luckily, there's plenty of good quarterbacks. I think you can make a swap if you need to. Ewers hyper efficient in a small sample. Excited to see whether that was an anomaly, but confident in his play considering it came against the best defense in football. So Quinn Ewers, solid GPP option if he's playing. He was listed as a dual threat. He has 1 rushing attempt this year. It was a sack for -9 yards. I wouldn't worry too much about the negative rushing. He does look mobile, not like Lamar, but I think scrambles are live with him. And then you can stack Texas. This is going to be a contrarian stack today. 34-point implied team total. Their pass rate's at 48%. In competitive games, it's going to rise. Nobody's playing Texas. Their team total's better than SMU. You have Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, clear top 2 receivers on this team. No, their volume's not on Rashee Rice's level, but we're talking about tournament pivots here. Jatavian Sanders is essentially an every down player at tight end. He has targets of 6, 5, and 3 in his first 3 games this year. He's at 3,400, decent pivot off of Donovan Ollie. I am stacking some Texas, but there's contingency plans if Quinn Ewers doesn't start. I'd be a lot less interested in this if Hudson Card gets the nod.
On the other side, are you looking to stack Donovan Smith? Are you looking to take something with this backfield or even receiving core, there's not a lot to love, but Texas Tech is in a competitive game here.
For sure. I forgot to mention Bijan. Easy. He's the best running back playing this slate. With Texas Tech, I'm a little worried about Donovan Smith's leash. He's thrown 5 interceptions this year. Not really all his fault either. He has 4 turnover-worthy plays on PFF and 5 interceptions. His receivers have been dropping balls, not finishing routes, and it's led to turnovers for this team. If you could guarantee me Smith plays every single snap, it's the Zach Kittley offense from Western Kentucky, up-tempo, pass-heavy, tons of volume, and he's somewhat mobile. Just don't know if he gets benched or not because, I don't know, turnovers are turnovers. You can't have them, even if they're not Smith's fault. There are cheap receivers to play here. It is a rotation, but this is kind of the other situation like Tennessee. They run so many plays, you kind of need to play multiple guys. Jaron Bradley's the one. He's been mispriced on DK the entire year. They have him priced as the wide receiver 3 in the offense. He's just not that. 9 targets per game at 4K. He's going to pop in cash builds. I think he's fine. If you're looking for tournament pivots, you could pay up for Miles Price, or you could pay down for like a Nehemiah Martinez. Martinez has 11 targets over the last 2 games. He's the Stoneman, another guy that's going to be potential leverage off Donovan Ollie. No running back survival.
Yeah, ugly situation in that backfield. Ugly situation for your boys, Notre Dame. They go into Chapel Hill, 2.5-point underdogs, 55.5 point total. My God, Drew Pine in the passing game. Let's get them out of the way. I assume you're not playing Drew Pine.
No, he is one of the funniest stats I've ever seen. 150 passing yards last week, 146 yards after the catch for his receivers.
But those 4 yards, though, nice.
4 earned yards for Drew Pine. Congrats, my man.
That renders Mayer and co useless.
Yes.
Does it
Maybe you could play a contrarian Mayer, but I'm not doing it.
What about Tyree and co in the backfield?
They're getting Logan Diggs back. That should make it 3 ways. Tyree's the pass catcher if you want to take that angle, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Good. We'll save some time. Sorry, Notre Dame. On the other side, an interesting situation. So Drake May has been good. I mean, he's been in some wild back and forth games, and now it looks like Josh Downs is coming back. He played against Florida A&M. They've held him out. What does that do? I mean, he is an elite. You're talking all-American wide receiver. Where does he go amongst the priorities on the outside?
Yeah, Josh Downs is just a pure wagon. Love playing him today. I think he's going to be low owned because of the injury status. He's at a really cheap price. There's so many good things to say about Josh Downs today. And he's in an explosive offense. Early returns on Drake May, amazing. The guy's hyper mobile, incredibly efficient through the air. Notre Dame's a paper tiger defense. I think what we saw in week 1 was not what we're going to see throughout the year. They've been exposed by other teams recently. It was a great outing against Ohio State, but that's just not the Notre Dame we've seen in recent weeks. So I think they can move the ball here. I did personally bet the under, but you're still taking a total that's middling on this slate. Love the stack here. And this team might get back Antoine Green. Watch warm-ups. He was the wide receiver 2 last year, average over 20 yards per catch. He's like a 60-year senior or something. He's the stone min. If you're down in lineups, like say you get toasted in the early slate, I'd be swapping off Ollie for guys like Antoine Green, assuming he's active.
Definitely a game with some interesting pieces, but particularly on the UNC side. All right, we got 10 minutes left. We got 3 games left. We're going to be just fine. I do want to say, in addition to all the great things we've got for college football, we are running a deal with Stokastic Plus NFL tools for showdown and single game. I know everyone loves that, for a single $1. Anytime we're offering something for $1, honestly, I mean, come on in. Click the link in the description of this video and use the promo code PRIMETIME, all one word, PRIMETIME at checkout. You're going to get 1 week of our NFL Primetime package for a single $1. That's giving you all those tools, showdown, single game slates. It's on the screen. I don't even need to say it. Just look at it. Just look at it. And you get in Discord as well. Come on in. I know you do a ton of showdown content, and there is serious money. We've got a great team, some of the sharpest in the business with Neil and Alex and everyone who does great work on that side of thing. Anthony Richardson, slate breaker. Sir, you should be focused on Oregon State tonight, besides dropping slander in the chat. Good luck to your team tonight. All right, here we go. Minnesota, Michigan State. Michigan State did not look good last week. Minnesota's looked awesome so far, but who knows how good they are. And now Autumn Bell is out. What does that do to the offense? Did they just gut them on the ground? How do you break down this Big Ten matchup?
Yeah, I'll try to keep these short. They're going to try to gut them on the ground. Ibrahim has awesome workload, but it's not quite what we saw last year. They're using Trey Potts a little bit. And if Ibrahim's going to pay off 9,600, he needs like 30 plus carries. He's GPP viable as a pivot off Bijan, but I'd rather have Bijan. In the pass game, you have really cheap options. And if this game stays competitive, Minnesota's going to have to elevate their pass rate out of necessity. I like Brevin Spanford, their tight end. He's been awesome this year, over 2 yards per route run last year, which is sick for a tight end. He's over 3 this year. Think you can use him at 3,500. Dylan Wright, Mike Brown-Stephens. Those are the other players I would look at. Probably just Wright. Brown-Stephens is a little too expensive here.
Anything on the Michigan State side? I asked you before the show if a guy like Reed was going to play. You've mentioned how coy they are with injuries. What's left for, the Spartans at home here?
Running back by rotation, Berger maybe in GPPs, but don't love it. They rushed for 42 yards on 29 carries last week. The unit's not great, and they're facing a good Minnesota defense. The one thing I'll say about the receivers, you can play Jaden Reed if he's healthy. Rumblings are he'll play today. Nothing confirmed. Keon Coleman's been good without him. Even in games where Reed played, Keon Coleman has 9 targets, 8 targets, and then without him last week, 12. He's playable regardless, but not really getting to any Michigan State today against a really slow, defensively sound Minnesota team.
Indiana, I don't even know why they should have just got rid of this game, honestly. Indiana and Cincinnati, nobody cares about this. 16.5-point favorites for the Bearcats, 57.5-point total. Connor Bazelak, another Missouri departure. He leads this team here. You've got Shivers in the backfield. There are some pieces here, but they only have a 20-point implied total for Indiana. So does that make them towards the bottom of the list, or are there pieces you're looking to get to?
Bazelak's always live to backdoor his way to 300 yards, but negative rusher. There's just better quarterback options. Backfield's a committee. Wasn't expecting that last week. Josh Henderson's outplayed Shivers. This should be a 50-50 committee to some degree. Cam Camper, he's playable. He's got a ridiculous role. 14.3 targets per game, 97 yards. Cam Camper doesn't need to be efficient. He can just volume his way there to productivity. He should be like a 7K player. DJ Matthews would be the leverage if you're using someone else. He's a little slot receiver coming off an ACL, but 9 targets in the last game. Those are the only players I'm looking at for Indiana.
On the other side, I already mentioned Ben Bryant isn't going to be getting you the 100-yard bonus anytime soon. So does that make him not playable? Or do you say, okay, we know it's going to be through the air and I can stack him up with a couple of Bearcats receivers and try to access what is a very healthy team total?
Yeah, he's been good, but he's been coaxed into some shootouts. Cincinnati's a team that takes their foot off the gas, and they're a team that will embrace the run when playing from ahead, which gives a lot of risk to Bryant. The issue with targeting a back is they use 4 of them. Now, Charles McClellan popped last week, 17 carries for him, but they didn't have Montgomery. They've used Corey Kiner and Miles Montgomery in the past too. I just don't have a lot of confidence in the role. If you think he's back to that 17 carry performance again, he's viable in tournaments. They have condensed their receiver room a little bit. Trey Tucker and Tyler Scott essentially operating on every single route. They never did that last year, so it is a change. I think they're viable in tournaments. It's the first time I'm really talking myself into any Cincinnati receivers. It's still tournament only, though.
Yeah, it is a really healthy total, though. I will say that. All right, we got 1 game left. Then we'll talk about a couple things on the way out. We got the Ducks. They're going into Pullman. 6.5-point favorites, 56.5-point total. We've seen this team crush bad teams. We've seen them get crushed by good teams, and then they looked really good against BYU. Does Bo Nix remain playable here, or on a slate with 25 other quarterbacks, he's just on the outside looking in?
He's playable because he rushes. Otherwise, he's tough to trust, and he's on the road here. There's some gnarly home road splits with Nix, but to keep it simple, he's going to have to get there on the ground if you're going to play him.
It looks like this backfield, unless you see something that I don't, just has a bunch of different guys. Guys are in, guys are out. Is there one guy that we... Okay, that makes it easier. And then if Bo Nix is getting there on the ground, I mean, like Chase Cota maybe? Like, is there really anything that this receiving core has to offer?
Cota plays every snap and he's cheap. So he could be a pivot off Ollie in the other side of this game. And then Troy Franklin's their 1. I got to him in some lineups, as gross as that is.
On the other side, you did mention, let's talk about Donovan Ollie. 3,500 seems like a very obvious pay down spot. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, he's the best value adjusted receiver on the slate.
Look at this. I go to say Cam Ward and I freak out because I love this guy. Incarnate word transfer. We're going to find out tonight. Washington State's kind of had a weird scenario so far. They did beat Wisconsin. Could you go to Cam Ward in extreme GPPs at 5K?
Yes, he'd be a pivot off Ashford. And we don't know anything about Ashford. He could suck. I personally think he'll get there on the ground, but we don't know that.
Cam Ward, baby. True 1%er. Anything else from this game? And then I got a couple questions for you on the way out.
Stribling, Victor, and Bell would be your GPP pivots off of Ali.
So Tay McWilliams is not seen in warmups. Do you think that solidifies possibly that Reese at the Stone Min is even more playable now?
No, they use 2 other guys.
So there's going to be a rotation probably no matter what.
I think, we don't know that. Reese has just been so good. Maybe they finally give him the keys. They just haven't done it yet. So it's uncertain.
Speaking of uncertain, I want to be clear, unless you see something else. We still don't know. Chandler Morris is warming up, but that's all we know.
I have him in 50%, not Chandler Morris. I have Dugan in 50% of my lineups. I didn't make any changes.
There you go. That is what we're talking about.
I could also lose all my money.
Yes.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
You certainly could lose all your money, but that's the risk we're willing to take. Favorite flex option, 4,500 on DKGPP. There's probably a lot of guys under there. There's some value today.
Yeah, I'd play Ollie or Bradley.
Comments to Arkansas, Texas A&M. I'll say this. Arkansas secondary without Catalan is an absolute sieve. They can't stop anybody, but Texas A&M can't protect anybody. I believe Stewart's back from suspension. A-Chain. I think Texas A&M will move the ball on Arkansas. Arkansas is broken defensively.
I bet the over.
There you go.
Love it. Texas A&M is so cheap on FanDuel today. They pop in every optimal, not just A-Chain, but a lot of Anai Smith too.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have 77 left for my third wide receiver on FanDuel. A.T. Perry, Worthy, Ollie, Hyatt with Tillman out.
I like Hyatt as a GPP option, but Perry would probably project the best.
Of all these QBs, I mean, are you looking to mostly have these guys running naked, or are there a couple guys up top that you're paying for with stackability? It seems like it's wide open.
Mordecai is the one I'm stacking the most.
Okay. Are you bringing it back, just to drill in there, because we've got about 1 minute left. When you do that, are you bringing it back with like a Johnston or a Barber or someone, or are you just letting it fly?
I did in some, others I did not. I also have a fair amount of Dugan by himself in some of those lineups, which I guess I should highlight.
Oh, that's pretty wild. I like that, though. Just capture all the consolidation, and Chandler Moore is going to have 8 touchdowns here. All right. 2 things of equal importance. We're winding down here. We got a ton of people in here, as we always do, and we appreciate it. Let's hit that like button. Let's get over 100. We've had a good streak of getting over 100 likes. I know everyone's waiting to put in their likes. Now would be the time, friends, because as we wind down here, and we're going to keep it rolling, all things. Any final thoughts on this college football slate? All the betting takes, Odd Shopper YouTube. Again, go over there. You can see us. The videos are already on the site. You can get all your betting picks there. But any final thoughts as we wind down?
Thank you guys all for being here today.
Yes.
I'm super pumped for this slate. Enjoy the Kansas Duke game. It's the best game of the year so far. And I just appreciate you all being here. It's a pleasure to actually do this, do what we love. So thank you guys very much.
Well said. Only thing you were wrong there. It is not the best game. The Temple UMass game is going to be an absolute battle. You've got UMass off a big win against Stony Brook, looking to make it 2 straight and cash their season-long win total of 1.5. Will they get it? Probably not. But until next time, from me, from Matt, from Mike behind the glass, good luck, everyone. Enjoy all the games today. Cash some tickets. Come back next week and hang out with us. We'll be here same time, same place.